Okay, well, welcome to those joining us live and for those watching the recording to our Women's History Month 2022 kickoff event here at Cosumnes River College. And I'm Diana Reed. I am history faculty at CRC and co-chair the Women's History Month Committee along with the wonderful Dr. Anastasia Panagakos from the Anthropology Department. And we are so excited to have put together a great calendar of events for Women's History Month this year. So before going any more into that, we did want to start out with our land acknowledgement statement for CRC. We acknowledge the land currently occupied by Cosumnes River College as the traditional home of the Miwok and Nisenan people. These sovereign people have been caretakers of the area since time immemorial. The state of California is home to more than 110 federally recognized Indian tribes, representing the most diverse set of tribal nations anywhere in the United States. Despite centuries of genocide and occupation, the Miwok and Nisenan people continue as vibrant and resilient federally recognized tribes, bands, and rancherias. The waters of the Sacramento, American, and Cosumnes rivers have nourished Miwok and Nisenan tribal communities with cultural and dietary sustenance throughout time. Cosumnes of Cosumnes River derives from the Plains Miwok language, stemming from the words Kosumu, meaning salmon, and Umne, meaning the place of. It translates as the place of the salmon. Today, we celebrate our Miwok and Nisenan tribal neighbors as the ancestral stewards of this land and honor their sustained existence. It is with their blessing and continued guidance that Cosumnes River College seeks to provide an accessible, equitable, and principled institution of learning. Okay, next I wanted to just kind of briefly mention some of the events that we have going on this month for Women's History Month. The theme for this year, which is selected by the National Women's History Month organization, is Women Providing Healing, Promoting Hope. And so we put together several events in conjunction with this theme. Some of the events that you'll find on the calendar are hosted by CRC community members, and some of them are events happening throughout the country that relate to the theme. So I'm just going to highlight the CRC events. Next week on March 10th, we have a Women in Film presentation that will be hosted by me and by Lauren Wagner, who's an RTVF professor at CRC. The following week, two events to mention. One is the National Women's History Month keynote speech, which is given by Sonia Renee Taylor. Should be a fabulous event. The title is Returning to Normal is Not an Option, Finding Healing and Meaning in Our Work. Later that week, there's another CRC featured event, a workshop for women by Anita Ross. This is hosted by the Focus for Women group on campus. The following week, we have two CRC featured events. One is a panel called Women Navigating the New Normal that's hosted by CRC business professor Sherry Carinci and some CSU gender equity master's students. And at the end of that week, on Friday, March 25th, there's a CRC featured event, a film discussion of Ama, which is a documentary film about the forced sterilization of Indigenous women. And there's a link to watch the film and then join the discussion. And then our final CRC event of the month is on March 29th. And that is hosted by English faculty, Leslie Gale and Kelsey Ford. And it is titled Identities in Crisis, Women's Wit and Women's Lit. So I encourage you to check the CRC website to get the calendar of event with all the dates and times and the Zoom links. Everything is virtual again this year. So hopefully you will be able to join. Okay, one other thing to mention, Emily Bond in the library created this fabulous research guide with many different sources available, and that will also be posted in the chat, and it's on the CRC website so that you can check out some of these great resources in conjunction with Women's History Month. And then finally, the committee, Anastasia and I would like to thank the presenters and facilitators for their participation and the support provided by Andrea Dean, Derek Santiago, Michael Bittner, Jennifer McLean, Andy Akins-Pogue, Emily Bond, Christy West, Emily Mitchell, Jane Crandall, and Christy Hart. And with no further ado, I will turn it over to my co-chair, Dr. Anastasia Panagakos, and she will get us started. Thanks so much for joining, everyone.
Thanks so much, Diana, for that introduction and for co-hosting and co-organizing Women's History Month yet again with me this year. It's always a pleasure to do that. And I just want to acknowledge how much work Diana did to bring a lot of the curated events that were coming nationally that are found on the Women's History Month calendar, which I also just posted in the chat. So you can go ahead and click on that link and find some more great events that are happening around the country. These are all free events and available virtually. And so again, I'm Anastasia Panagakos. I am a professor of anthropology here at CRC, and I'm going to introduce our panelists and also tell you a little bit about our session for today. And so first, I will introduce the panelists, and then we will ask them a few questions about their work in both the healthcare fields and also healthcare advocacy. And then also we will then have a brief Q&A. And so if any participants have questions that they would like to pose to the panelists, please feel free to put them in the chat at any time. Diana and I will monitor the chat and will pose the questions as we see them, and perhaps also towards the end. And so again, welcome to our three panelists. I'm just going to give a little brief introduction of each one. So we have Corey Burns, who's coming with us from the Allied Health Program. And this semester, Corey is teaching classes in medical assisting and also in clinical procedures. A fun fact you should know about Corey, we asked all our panelists to give us a little personal insight, is that Corey used to own a paintball business. I imagine that that's maybe a little bit different than teaching classes, although maybe not that different. I can imagine there's some similarities. So welcome to Corey from Allied Health. Also, we'll welcome Brandy Jones-Thomas, who is from the soon-to-be newly minted program of Social Work and Human Services. And this semester, Brandy is teaching some interesting classes on the Intro to Psychology of Human Relations and also techniques of group counseling, among others. Something fun you should know about Brandy is that Brandy served in the Air Force, and when she was a new airman, she actually crashed a deuce, which luckily she sent me a picture of this. It is a large transport vehicle, and she crashed this deuce into a police car. And she also happened to be a cop at the time, and this was actually where they land planes. So she got in a little bit of trouble about that, but definitely had a good story to tell when she came out of the service. And finally, our last panelist is Lee Kraliev, who's coming to us from anthropology. And this semester, Lee is teaching her first section of Introduction to Cultural Anthropology with a medical focus. And so we welcome Lee to our campus for the first time as a professor. Lee also has a day job, which is that she does training and curriculum development for Planned Parenthood. Some of the trainings that she does include trainings on cultural humility and reproductive justice issues. And so she's coming to us from an advocacy standpoint. And something fun to know about Lee is that Lee has 7 chickens, and they are all named for characters out of Hamilton and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So that's a little fun thing to know about Lee. So again, wanted to welcome all 3 of our panelists, and I'm going to pose a question, and then I'll have the panelists kind of go around and answer them. And so our first question is, how did you become interested in healthcare or healthcare advocacy? And was there something specific that put you on that path? And so for this question, why don't we go Corey and then Brandy and then Lee, and then when you're done answering, just let the next folk know it's their turn, and we'll go from there. So Corey, what got you interested, and was there anything specific that kind of put you on this path?
Thank you for that. And to answer your first question, there really isn't a whole lot of difference between running a paintball game and classroom management. If only I could bring my paintball marker into class, it'd be kind of handy sometimes. So what got me interested in, and I'm a little embarrassed to say this considering it's Women's Health History or Women's History Month, but what got me initially interested in healthcare was a boy. So my high school boyfriend was going for firefighter, and back then at the time it was a benefit but not required to also do paramedic. And I thought, ooh, that sounds cool. So that kind of initially prompted my my medical journey. I then worked in student health clinic when I was at Humboldt State, and I actually got to see some of the stuff that the doctors do, and I went, oh, this is really, really cool. And it just kind of went from there. So my initial trajectory was to be a physician assistant, and I was working towards doing that. Had a couple of things that kind of got in the way of that. That's what started my medical assisting journey, and I just stayed with it. So rather than advancing into PA, I worked as an MA for a while, and I realized that two things. I realized one, that the new grad medical assistants that I was having to retrain once they got to the clinic, that I would be able to reach more people if I taught rather than just the ones who were cycling through my individual clinic. But also that's kind of where the health advocacy component came in as well, is being an advocate for my patients, and then also making sure that the MAs and the students that I was teaching become good advocates for themselves and their family members as well. So I always tell my students, yes, I want you to be a good medical assistant and be an advocate for your patient. That's part of your role. But I also want you to be a good patient. And I want you to be able to help your mom or your dad or your grandma when they go to the doctor, to be a good patient, to get the care that you're supposed to be getting. So, you know, the general public doesn't necessarily know what they should be getting as far as service. And there's a huge discrepancy in the level of care that is given. So, you know, that's always been a focus of mine, even before hearing about the term patient advocacy, right? That's kind of always been my focus. So it just kind of has melded from that initial, this is what I want to do, and has become completely different from that. But wouldn't change it, because like I said, I get to mold people into good healthcare workers who can be advocates for their patients and their families and themselves and all that kind of stuff. So that's how I got here. All right, Brandy.
All right, let's hope no tech issues again. Thank you all for your patience. So for me, it was high school. And so in high school, I was going to be a nurse originally, like some of us that want to help, right? That seems like the best thing to be. So you realize you have a little phobia to blood, and that's not the best thing for you to be, which was my case. And so what I decided to do was take some other classes they offered at the time of high school. I took a class in forensic psychology. It was called something different back then. And so I had this interest in knowing and understanding kind of criminal justice. And so went in to be a cop, right? Trying to further my idea. You couldn't join a police department at 18 back then. You had to be 21. So like, oh, I'll go to the military, you know, do my time and then come back out and join the police department. So I went to the military, pursued a degree in criminal justice while in the military. And while I was doing that, and I was a cop on the base, I learned that I really wanted to work with people without a gun, that I did not want to have that gun on my holster to try to change people's behaviors. It was a better way for me to do it. And so while in the military, finished that bachelor's degree in criminal justice, debated being an attorney very briefly, then realized I didn't get to pick my team. So whether I would be the defense or the prosecutor, I was not happy with that option. And so I said, you know what, I just want to help people. And so left the military at about 22. And then I got a master's degree in counseling psychology. And then once I started doing that, I worked in the field of social work for a while. So I was doing foster care social work for a couple of years, working with those that had been removed from the care of their bio parents. Loved that work, decided to get my degree, but wanted to do more direct work with that community, meaning kids. I always wanted to work with kids to a capacity. And so I went into mental health, specialized in working with children and adolescents for about 10 years. So I did that work very well from what I was told. And so a lot of it led me to the reality of like people needed healing. And I was glad to heal 30 people a year-ish with my caseload. Then I realized teaching, just like Corey said, would yield me 200 people a year that I could offer and mold and support. And that sounded way more productive as I got older. And so I chose to come into academia and teach what I do or what I did because I love it. Also, I just have this idea that everyone deserves an opportunity to be well. They just do, whatever that means for them. And I kind of promote that through my courses, through, I hope, my own actions. But also the reality is that we come into this field because we believe that. We don't just preach it, we actually believe it in different capacities. And so that's what brought me here. And I'll pass it to Lee.
That's wonderful. I love hearing both your stories and how it's been somewhat winding, and you've had all these unique experiences that you've been able to bring together to get to this place where you're now multiplying your impact by teaching people. It's so cool, and I resonate with a lot of that. Similarly, when I was in probably middle school, high school age, around the time when you're starting to think about social issues and equality, even though I'd always felt very comfortable and safe growing up, around that time, my family lost our health insurance. And this was before the Affordable Care Act. And so because I had a pre-existing condition, even though I was a child, my parents struggled to be able to get health insurance for me. And the only ones that were available were insanely expensive. Fortunately, my family was able to make it through that. My dad got another job, so we were able to get health insurance. But that's when I started to recognize that just having healthcare services isn't enough. There are so many barriers that start getting in people's way. And when it comes to health, that's so important. It just affects every aspect of your life, especially as a parent when you have children, trying to make sure that they're safe and healthy. So that started to inform how I approach the world and things that I started to care about. Later on, after college, I decided to focus on working on a campaign for a candidate who was running for governor of Texas, and her big platform was reproductive health care access. That's what she was most known for. And I was so passionate about that I moved out there to volunteer on the campaign. I quit my job. I fortunately got a job on the campaign after 2 weeks in Texas. And so I was out there, fighting the fight to help the people of Texas have reproductive health care. But while I was there, I didn't have health care myself. And I needed access to both reproductive and mental health care. And I ended up facing really horrific barriers to it. And so here again, I thought I was in this position to help others. And yet again, there were these terrible barriers that really impacted my life. And so that really reaffirmed that after the campaign, I wanted to keep focusing on advocacy. So a year after that, I got the job that I have now with Planned Parenthood, where I'm focused on the advocacy side, engaging communities, engaging our supporters to take action with us, and finding ways that all people can make a difference on all the aspects of health, whether that's helping provide healthcare services, helping people get into the health center past protesters, or meeting with legislators, writing to city council members, going to rallies, supporting our sex education programs. So that really wide array, since it's all those different things that can impact people's health. Even if we have great healthcare providers, that's often not enough. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you so much to all three of you. Thank you. It is so interesting to see how, even though you all came from very different paths and what initially got you interested might be very different, what comes through with all of your cases are just the passion that you developed and how it very often starts from a very personal perspective of the experiences that we have, and that leads us to our path. Which leads me sort of to my second question, which is, now that you've all been in these fields for a while, is what your thoughts are on the current state of women in the healthcare and health advocacy fields. And, I tend to be a glasses half empty kind of person sometimes. So I always ask, what are the challenges, but also what have been the advances, and what do you see as maybe some of the good things that have come out of course, the last 2 years of this pandemic. And we're always looking for some silver linings, I know, with that. And so this time around, how about we go Brandy first, and then Lee, and then Corey.
Awesome, thank you. And so part of my journey as a therapist, we didn't learn about telehealth, right? Doing therapy via a computer or phone was really taboo. Those that trained me were probably 30 years my senior at Given, and so we all had the same kind of agreement. But what I've seen though in the shifts with COVID that we didn't really plan for, which is a positive, is that for some folk, being able to be home and engage in a session, if it's a safe space at home, they really were more engaging. They were more comfortable. They could have their favorite blanket, their favorite item with them in the midst of talking about some really challenging things. And so I saw an advantage there that I hadn't seen in my previous years as a therapist. In addition to that, I started to realize that it gave better access to immediate care for some. So it eliminated travel time, eliminated other barriers for some people. So it became more accessible. And then the other side of that, as it became more accessible, all of our wonderful fears of ethics come back in, and legality and protecting people from themselves. I think one of you just spoke to that, right? Being able to protect the public from themselves, right? There's risk involved when you're in your bedroom doing a therapy session and people may overhear you in your home, right? There's some risk there people may not understand. And so we are constantly doing both things, right? Giving people the direct care, but also advocating for the things that need to change to align with the new thing. And telehealth is the new thing that we will embrace and probably be funded for greatly in the next couple of years. And so teaching students that and being open to it is another thing. In addition to that, I think a lot of the things we have learned in the field, far as me and how to engage with different communities, when it comes to healing and promoting hope, the reality that impermanence is just the reality, right? The only thing consistent is change. And in this field, that's been consistent. I can attest to that. So when I started off out of grad school compared to now, it's been rifts and changes. And I think being able to teach, that's part of any career possibly, but for sure ours, because we evolve as people, that's a good thing, right? As we evolve, our theories evolve, our ways to be with each other can evolve, and we become more effective. And so I think it's a benefit, even though I would not have preferred to found this out through a pandemic. I definitely see the benefit in finding it out now, as opposed to when I'm 60, right? When I'm like, oh, that would have been a great idea, right? But now that great idea is present and we can mold it the way we see fit. Again, applying great ethics, good communication with colleagues in our fields, and being supportive of, again, meeting the needs of those coming into the field as new helpers, new social workers in the face of a post-pandemic era, which none of us have experienced before. So now I'll pass it on.
Yeah, I that's so insightful what you said about, what the pandemic has sort of brought up for us. And of course, it's an unfortunate reason for us to have found it out. But yeah, I've definitely seen that too, where it sounds like people are becoming a lot more aware of barriers to accessing healthcare. Telehealth has been incredible for the patients at Planned Parenthood. Just the accessibility, the ability to roll it out so quickly. And then things like Black maternal mortality, I feel like that wasn't really being talked about as much just a few years ago. And now it's becoming this thing that lots of organizations are bringing up and recognizing the biases that healthcare providers have, and how it's so important to have providers that reflect the patients, the communities that we serve. On the advocacy side, we tend to get a lot of people wanting to support when there are more crises. It happened, after the 2016 election. We had a big flood of interest in people getting involved, which is wonderful. That the reaction that people have to these times is to want to do something. And so on the advocacy side, we've been able to do similar things, similar adjustments that our healthcare providers have been able to do in terms of making advocacy and volunteering a lot more accessible. Previously, and still in many ways, volunteering is a privilege. You have to have the time, flexibility to do that. Previously in person, if you had transportation, if you had kids, you'd have to get childcare. You might, if you have, a inconsistent work schedule, you couldn't sign up for recurring volunteer shifts. But now with everything being virtual, and we're still doing everything virtual to protect our patients, now we've been forced to, and excited at the ability to, create opportunities that are virtual, that are immediate, that are super accessible. So if you only have 1 hour a month and you have a cell phone, you can still join us to take action, do something, which has allowed our volunteer base to so much more accurately reflect our community and our patient base than it did before, when people could, the volunteership was in the middle of the day during the work week. Not many people can do that. So it's been really exciting to see that we've just expanded our volunteer base and the diversity of it, bringing in more young women, especially, who, this young women of color that are our patients. And so they're the ones that we want to be leading the advocacy work as well, and making sure that we're creating opportunities for them to do it. One of the challenges is that in women's healthcare, reproductive healthcare, a lot of advocacy and social justice work, it is the majority women who are doing the work, which is amazing, but these are not the highest paying fields. And it can be a real struggle when we're the ones who are being so affected. We also are the ones that are having to do the work. And then we're also, not going to be making as much as if we were, going into private for-profit work. So, how can we address that? I don't know if that's focusing on, yes, we have a majority of women here, but is it the women who are being promoted? Are they the ones in leadership? Are they the ones making decisions? If not, how can we create those pathways to support more women in moving up? And then how can we engage more men in volunteering and doing some of that free labor in advocating for women's healthcare issues? So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential, lots of areas for us to make sure it's more accessible and more equitable in terms of who's doing the work and how it's being done. I'll pass it over to Corey.
Thank you. So, as far as women in healthcare historically, there's always been a strong presence of women in, direct patient care. But again, like Brandy said, it's more nursing, it's more support staff. And so one of the things that I've seen in the last 10-ish years is the women actually starting to go for those direct provider positions. There are a lot more women PAs now. There are more women going through med school, right? Women neuroscientists, right? They're really starting to kind of take on some of those direct provider roles and making those decisions, which, speaking to the, we want to make sure that our providers reflect our patient base, but also understand the issues, right? So one of the challenges, historically speaking, forever, up until maybe the last 3 or 4 years, has been that most all of the research done on physiology and diseases and treatments and all that stuff have been on the, white males. And just recently, and by recently I'm talking, in the broad scheme of things, realizing that, surprise, surprise, women's physiology is different, right? I mean, yes, we heard years ago that women heart attacks present differently than male heart attacks, but there still isn't that much information out there about why and, all these kinds of things. And still I'm not even sure what word to use, when you're a female patient seeing a male provider, there's a disconnect there, and that often leads to misdiagnosis or no diagnosis, or you're just still kind of falling back on that, you're just being hysterical kind of perspective, which can be very detrimental, right? So I'm glad that Lee brought up the maternal health care and the discrepancies that we see in Black women pregnancies and childbirth, and the major inequity in care, just in general, pain, childbirth, right? And so we're starting to see some progress with that. So I think that's one of the silver linings that we've been seeing for the last 6-7 years. And I, the 2016 election, I think, prompted it. Kavanaugh prompted, some more of these women advocacy saying, okay, you know what, enough of this. We're here, we're a force, we're a presence, start paying attention kind of thing. And I think that that's really starting to have starting to see kind of a snowball effect of these women getting into these research positions and provider positions, so that they are reflective of patients and what our concerns are, that you have that clear identity with. And so I think that's kind of the silver lining of all of this muck that we've been going through for the last however long, is that we're finally starting to hear the voices, and they're actually starting to make an impact on legislation and research and those sorts of things, which is about time, right? So that's kind of my perspective on kind of where we are right now. So I'm hopeful because of that, right? So that promoting hope, that's where I see the biggest source of hope, is that all of these women and across the age spectrum, right, are starting to get involved and say, all right, enough of this, listen to me kind of thing, and not backing down, right? So making sure that they have their own voice to speak up for themselves. And if they are being pushed aside or whatever, going, all right, well, forget you then, I'm going over here and I'll try it again with this provider, instead of just going, oh, okay. So, they're having a little bit more I think they feel the strength to be able to speak up for themselves, which is what's going to make a difference.
Thank you, Corey. And actually, before we turn to any other questions, I just wanted to say something that that you're all talking about that made me think was, you know, as professors, we all have students who are quite young. I always think it's funny how we get older, but our students seem to kind of stay the same age, right? Between 18 and 22 or so. Of course, we have lots of older students, but we get this new cohort that comes in all the time. And I'd be curious, as just sort of a follow-up, if anyone wants to address this or speak to anything anyone else has said, which is, culturally speaking, that's something that Lee and I have talked a lot about and engaged with in medical anthropology, is just seeing the sea change in, as you were saying, Corey, like women now feeling more empowered and more able to go into direct care positions, and even just their understanding of their health. Just a very small thing to share, and I'd like to hear what you all have to say, which is, I'll never forget the first time a student spoke up in class about wanting more mental health services on campus. That for years we taught, and it didn't come up in the class or in classes because students were afraid to talk about that, right? Because it was a taboo subject to discuss mental health. And then there came a point where all of a sudden students did start to speak up. And now we see more of a, at least there are more resources, and the pandemic, of course, has opened that up, but it's not perfect, but that's become something that we talk about now. And it was very cultural, the shame associated with mental health. You would never say that you were in therapy or that you were being medicated. And now this generation seems to be, at least embracing the idea that mental health is for everybody and we all should have access to it. So I'll stop there, but if anyone would like to jump in with any other comments on that or anything else, please do.
I'll jump in. Thank you for bringing that up. Oftentimes, the thing I've gotten from students, some students will disclose to me, African Americans, that I am the first African American teacher or professor they've ever had. There's been times that I've come into the classroom and the students are unsure I'm the professor, just for the sheer sake of visibility, right? And so, and then when I say I'm a licensed therapist, even though I don't practice anymore, a lot of Black students want to understand the field, right? Because they've been told to become psychologists or psychiatrists, and they don't understand what the difference is and what made me chose the field I chose. But also the disparity when I have them do a research project and I say, let's look at demographics for our field, right? And I say, remember, we're still less than 20%. That's across all ethnic groups. I think psychology-wise, we're still less than 20% as far as the diversity offered in the field. And so I tell them it's very unlikely that it's going to be more than 3 of you in a room at any given point. So as you climb the career ladder, you get the more degrees you get, the less of people reflective of you will see. And then what that means for consumers is the less they will also see, right? And so there's a big disconnect, the issue we have that has not been really tackled or resolved in the way of giving equitable access to diversifying the field, right? Besides what we do, my classrooms are diverse, ironically, but like I told them, as they go into campus on campus, 4-year, 6-year degrees, they're going to see less and less diversity, and that's still something I can't completely answer. But I do offer them support to know that we can be each other's mentor and colleagues as they go through it. And I end up doing that. I end up being a mentor to some of those students that want to navigate the field as a woman or a man of color, and don't know how to do it because they may not see others that look like them for many years across agencies. So we openly talk about it best we can across, but at the end of the day, usually it's private conversations where students are coming to me and saying, will I be accepted, as a Black woman with this, right? Will I be accepted as a Black male with this in the field? And me having to clarify what that could mean, as honest as I can and respectful to the field as possible.
I'll jump in, just with a different, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Brandy, because that's definitely it's a barrier for some to think that they won't be taken seriously, right? But Anastasia, you were talking about the different cultures, and I think it's still, it's something that we talk about, that there is still a very strong cultural component of being able to stand up for yourself as a patient or as a patient advocate, right? It's a little bit different maybe if they've gone through my program once they get into the field as a working MA, but still not fully empowered, maybe because of their culture or their belief system, to be able to stand up and question, right? Because that's disrespectful. And so there is still that very delicate line that it's very hard for some students to be able to step over that line, to be a true patient advocate or a family advocate without going against their culture, their belief system. So it's a very delicate line to have to walk for students in that situation. You know, and again, there's no easy answer other than making sure that we acknowledge that, you know, you're not being disrespectful. This is part of the job, is patient care and making sure they're safe and getting everything that they need. It's in this situation that's not disrespectful. And again, just kind of as honestly and gently navigating them through the nuances of, you know, being an advocate and what that actually means versus standing up to someone of authority, which, you know, they still kind of struggle with. So that's always a delicate subject that we have to talk about.
I've been really impressed by the students in my class this semester. Of course, it's my first class, so I can't compare it to, you know, how things might have changed. But you know, I know that when I was taking my first intro to cultural anthropology classes, so much felt like it was very new information to me. All you know, these ideas of cultural relativism and equity and you know, all these terms that now students are coming in with a wealth of vocabulary around a lot of these issues already. And I love the class that I'm teaching now. It's majority women, and a lot of them are in the allied health program, and they range from high school students all the way to people who have been in their careers for decades, who and they all bring in really incredible experience and insights, you know, talking about the intersecting social identities that might impact the, you know, the topics that we're talking about, bringing in these things that I haven't even like brought up yet. And so Nadia, she's on the call, she's in my class, and she has incredible insights that she shares from her work in the community. And so yeah, I think it's really inspiring to see what they're bringing in and sort of the things they're already thinking about, and how much, I don't know if they're getting it through just, you know, because it's coming up more in the media, if they're getting it in other classes. I've been quite impressed with how CRC has been integrating it into a lot of how they teach teachers to teach, what I got in the faculty diversity internship program. So yeah, I mean, I think with at least the group in my class and the allied health program, we're definitely in good hands going forward, and I'm excited for them to be able to go into the healthcare field already having these things in mind, rather than learning on the job, with which a lot of current healthcare providers are having to do.
Thank you for those follow-ups. And I actually just would like to read, let's see, Brandy, you had just posted this in the chat, and I just want to read it just so that we have it on our recording. Brandy, you had said there's also limited research on the impacts on having a mental health provider that reflects the patient's cultural background. Patients can describe the qualitative data portion, but we lack quantitative data to support better efforts of diversifying the field. And so that is a great point to make. And then let's see, Diana, you have a follow-up. Would you like that addressed now, or do you want to wait till the Q&A portion? What would you like? We can do it now.
We can wait, wait, or whichever.
Okay, actually, why don't we just address it now, because our last question is more about like advice for students. So this is a good one. So from Diana Reed, she says, I would love to hear the panelists' thoughts on any of the following topics that many of my students mention regarding their health and well-being: caregiver burnout, particularly for women, the state of reproductive justice today, and healing from trauma. So if anyone would like to tackle that one.
Just some real easy topics to address, you know.
Keeping it light and carefree, Diana.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
You don't have to address all of them, but, you know, just any of those topics if you feel so inclined.
I'll tackle healing from trauma and let the panelists handle the other two, because I don't get much of the other, but trauma encompasses all of those things, right? And so a lot of the trainings, and opportunities I've had to talk about racial trauma is new. right? So trauma in general, I went to school for, I understand. I've been trained in DSM. But when it comes to healing from it, besides a practitioner, we've been given limited options, right? And so when I teach my 302 course, that intro to psychology of human relationships, the students often try to parallel that with therapy. And I had to do a hashtag years ago when that was so popular. Hashtag, this is not like therapy. This is actually just self-discovery and just learning to be well. And they were all surprised, like, wait a minute, we can just do this on our own. And so some of the processes for healing for trauma comes from an intrinsic way to deal with the reality of what happened and seeking the right supports. Some therapy is appropriate depending on the traumas you've been through. Some you can do some healing on your own, but it's a continued process. And I think the new wave of being honest about our mental health conditions across different platforms as younger folk are doing doesn't give them opportunity to heal. And so my question always to a young person I meet, when I say young, I mean people in their 20s-ish because of my current age. And so when I ask them, I say, what's going on with you? And they say, well, I have PTSD. And I'll say, well, how are you getting treatment for it? And they said, no, I just have PTSD. I'm like, well, you don't have to have PTSD. You can get treatment for it. So I think we've been really good and boisterous about talking about mental health, but we have not done as well talking about mental wellness, right? How do we prepare and stay well? And then how do we face trauma and heal from it over generations? Because generational traumas happen across families. And so I often speak about that in different capacities. And that aligns directly with self-care, right? Is that when we learn different ways to be with ourselves and what we've been through in our lives, we develop a different kind of self-love that we can use to become more resilient, especially as women, especially if you're in a culture where the woman bears like the eldest duties, like within my culture, the eldest woman bears a lot of the responsibilities. And so oftentimes you have healed traumas you didn't even know existed until you become an adult. And so it's a continuous process. And I love the fact that we're talking about wellness now and not just the illness of trauma, but how to heal from it too.
That's awesome. Kind of heal thyself, right? So I'll speak to the burnout, and then I'll let Lee speak to reproductive justice, because that kind of sounds like it's a little bit more along her realm. And I will tell you that burnout is a real thing and it can happen quickly. And part of it, I think, comes from what Brandy was saying, is having that trauma that maybe you didn't even register as trauma. I think that's another area that people don't necessarily realize, that PTSD and trauma response can come from things that you wouldn't necessarily think of as trauma, right? Because that word, we usually think of, it's huge, right? This huge event happened, and of course I've got PTSD from that. But it can come from all of these little micro things too. And people don't realize that they're coming from a trauma response in reflection of whatever these little things were. And so that can then lead to burnout. And so if you're not doing that wellness stuff, you are going to burn out, and it doesn't matter what field you're in. But for sure in healthcare, it absolutely happens. I talk about this in my intro class. As far as being able to stay in the field and not get burnout, we actually talk about it. You have to have a way of alleviating the stress from this job. It's a stressful job. You've got a lot of emotions going on. You get connections with patients. You care about them. You've got multiple, responsibilities pulling at you at all times. You have to have a way to alleviate that, the home stuff, so it doesn't bleed into your work, and the work stuff, so it doesn't bleed into your home, whatever that means, meditation or therapy, or just going by the batting cages on the way home, or, whatever it is, that you can alleviate some of that stuff and get back into a mental space that is healthy and well. Because this job, you will burn out quick, especially with direct patient care, because of that emotional pull. And, probably more for women, although I don't know that there's necessarily studies on men, but, innately we kind of come from a caregiver role anyway. And if we're also doing all of this at home with our families, our pets, whoever, it's just all stacking on top of each other. And so, burnout is a very real thing. I have quite a few students, right, coming to me after their second or third occupation because of burnout. And I tell them, you have to figure out how to keep that balance and that balance, right, so that you're not going to burn out again. Otherwise, it's just kind of a waste of time. And you're not able to provide the care and the hope that drew you to this field in the first place.
Yeah, and I think that can be tied to reproductive justice, just what people are seeing in the news and the media and legislation and Supreme Court decisions that is seemingly constantly hitting us over the head, locally, statewide, and nationally. Even just hearing about those things can cause burnout, can make you just feel overwhelmed and want to give up. And when it's been so unceasing for so long, and a lot of people can struggle with that. In terms of what I'm hearing from students, I haven't heard too much on from around reproductive justice lens from students, although often they'll bring it up and connect it to those intersecting issues that we're talking about in class. I know from the community, there's a lot of confusion and fear and concern. There's, of course, so much going on in other states and at the national level around abortion restrictions and reproductive rights and access. A lot of people don't know actually, what's legal, what's the status of all these different things, and what that means for us in California. And we're fortunate in California that we are protected at the state level. Abortion rights are protected. And we're also, there's the California Healthy Youth Act, which sets standards for comprehensive sex education. But there's still, of course, a lot of barriers. In Visalia, Planned Parenthood has been trying to open up a new, larger healthcare office that would provide family medicine services in addition to reproductive health care. There's been a significant opposition to it, not around necessarily logistical issues, but around people just being opposed to some of the services that Planned Parenthood provides. And this is a community where there's really concerning provider to patient ratios that already don't have enough providers. And now the community is being prevented from accessing additional healthcare because of these potentially moral belief arguments that are impacting people's access. There's a lot locally too. We're also seeing a ton of people, a significant increase of people coming in from out of state to access healthcare services in California and Nevada, which our affiliate also covers. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of concern, but there's a lot of different ways that people can take action that I know they're trying to do and do important things around. And then like Anastasia was saying, lots of students are also reaching out about mental health a lot more. Students have emailed me directly saying, I don't have access to my medication, so can I get an extension? And it's good to see that they are open about it and are self-aware about it and recognizing how that can impact how they're able to get through a class.
Go ahead, Brandy. We had a question in the chat. Would you like to repeat the question and answer it?
Yes, for sure. So Whitney asked, what about healing from traumatic trauma as an African-American woman in spite of family rejection on mental health help? My heart goes out to our community, Whitney. My mother is an old Southern Baptist woman, similar to my dad. And for many years, even after I went into the field of counseling and social work, no one knew what I did. I was still a social worker. They thought I worked for CPS or something like that. So we didn't talk about mental health so much. Me going to school for it didn't even make sense. So they didn't understand. And so after some years, though, thankful for an older cousin, we were able to acknowledge it and then see our own own mental health challenges in our family. And that over time, it took us, decades for us to layer in healthy ways to engage in our family members that we saw struggling with mental health. And so the trauma of that, as you spoke to, is the invisibility of mental illness, but the visibility of it. It's like a double-edged sword. It's like we know someone in our family is struggling with something, but we don't know what to do. And it's taboo to say something like, oh, I think you're depressed. That is really not okay mostly. And if someone says they are, then they can be shamed and shunned or ostracized, right? And so the Black community is trying. There's different books. Some of those are in the resource offered that I've read, that Emily offered in the resource guide. But the reality of it is we have to be able to own our wellness and that we deserve it, right? And I speak in the ways of liberation currently in my speech. And so I say things like, not disclosing my mental wellness or my mental illness is not allowing me to liberate myself, to be free, right, as a person. And we all deserve freedom, right? And so when I teach and talk about this in different capacities, what I really encourage is to gain your knowledge about what it means for you to be mentally well, not just name your mental illness, right? So saying I'm depressed, as opposed to saying is I need more support when I'm struggling, and that looks like this, right? So we can take away the label because we don't perceive the label as helpful in our community sometimes, but the asking is okay, right? So if I go to someone and I say, hey, I'm struggling, right? We know struggle. We love that word. It's popular in my family. We say struggle all the time. But struggle has been infamous for mental illness, right? I'm struggling with this, right? Is a mental illness we've not been able to address as a family. So it takes a couple people in a family to reset generations, and it takes at least 3 generations to reset a pattern in a family system, at least 3. I'm on my 3rd, right? So after my son and my daughter, my family will be more embraced. And I offer you the same, that they will embrace wellness as we all start to talk about mental health as a wellness route, as opposed to just being mentally ill.
Thank you so much for those follow-ups. And I just, again, the providing healing, promoting hope, it's just the idea that we so oftentimes privilege the idea of mental illness over mental wellness. Even that for a lot of us linguistically is something that we're just getting our heads around, right? And I like that much better. So thank you for helping me with my glasses half empty personality. So we have just one last set of questions before we wrap up that we wanted to pose, which is, do you have, and you've already offered some actually really great advice for students, but do you have any specific advice for students that are going into these fields? And also maybe even something you wish you had known when you were starting out. And then I know times were different perhaps, but I think there's probably some wisdom that we acquire from down the road when we can look back. And so this time, let's go, we'll go Lee, Corey, and then Brandy.
Yeah, I'd say if you're passionate about healthcare access, advocacy, think about all the different ways that you can make a difference. There's so many different ways. I know even now sometimes I'm like, oh, I should be a medical assistant. I should be in the health center, providing this direct service care, because it seems like they're making such an impact. But then I recognize that they're, like Corey was saying, you can often multiply your impact when you do take that step back, because our healthcare providers, the ones who are providing direct service, need people advocating for them. Our patients need people advocating for them. So even if you're not particularly interested in science or you pursuing that specific path to get into healthcare, you can have a huge impact by focusing on the advocacy, on volunteering. And there's so many different ways to do that, whether that's supporting healthcare services, supporting education programs, health education programs, or doing that outreach to legislators, lobbying, both at the local, state, and national levels. It can have significant impact. I would say if you are going more into the advocacy side rather than becoming a healthcare provider, my advice for students would be to avoid student loans as much as possible. One of the reasons I've been able to pursue this work and change careers and you volunteer and do these things that don't necessarily pay that much is because I haven't had the pressure of student loans. And that just has given me the flexibility to do this work that I'm really passionate about. So I feel very fortunate to do that. So I would say that's an unfortunate reality that we have to keep in mind, that unfortunately this work isn't going to be paid as much as other areas would be. So think about that when you're choosing what schools you go to and how you pay for that. And of course, the students watching us are already so smart because they're going to community college, which is the smartest way to get your degree. So just keep, as you progress forward, keep that in mind in terms of if you're transferring somewhere. But yeah, that's my advice for now.
All right, so the advice that I give incoming students, and I say this to anybody, is that if you're going to go into healthcare, take as many psychology classes as you possibly can. I have my undergraduate in psychology. It wasn't intentional for working in healthcare in the way that I'm now promoting it. I did it because there's no math. So I knew I needed a degree. It was going to come in handy, but there was no math. Yay, psychology. So, but now I tell my students, take as much psychology and social work type classes as you possibly can to try and understand human behavior. Because when you're in a situation where you're dealing with another human, and especially a hurting human, whether it's physical or emotional, being able to take that different perspective and understanding why they're behaving the way that they are allows you to approach that situation from a much more compassionate viewpoint rather than a reactionary, right? So if somebody is being verbally aggressive, which patients get, and they are lashing out at you because you're a safe target, right? All this kind of stuff. If you know why they're doing that, you will respond differently than just quit yelling at me, right? So as much psychology and human behavior and social work type classes as possible, I think will benefit you in the long run if you're going to go into any kind of healthcare. It doesn't matter what field you go into, but it will definitely help give you that a little bit more, again, compassionate, empathetic perspective of that interaction. And you'll be a much better patient advocate for it because you'll be able to recognize where this is coming from and maybe what kind of help they might need, even though they may not know that they need it or know what to ask or what kind of support they may want to ask for. If you kind of know, oh, that's classic projection, right? Or whatever, you'll know and you can kind of reframe your patient interview, your questions that you're asking them. So as much as possible, that's always my advice. Brandy?
Thank you. Yes, take some of my classes, as Corey just said, my intro 300 class and my 302. We do explore those things, but it's true. I get a lot of students that are coming from vet tech, EMT, fire tech, farm tech, that take that 302 class or the 300 class to understand human behavior a little bit. And it does make it easier to empathize with the person that's yelling at you over the counter, because it's not about you, it's about something else. And just knowing that is okay. One thing I want to offer, I'm going to put it in the chat. I literally I have so many things available to me as far as what I've created for students. And students ask me that question, what advice do I give? And the real one is to balance, like Corey said earlier, like Lee said, and I talk about self-care in 4 parts. And so nowadays there's so much information available. I tell students, let's start with just the basics, right? Think about self-care as self-love, right? So instead of saying, I'm going to not eat today because I have to rush through my courses, say it's unloving for me not to give my body food, right? It is not me acting in self-love. Self-care is great for those that are doing jobs that don't have a lot of direct patient care. But if you're getting to the field of allied health, you need to learn that self-care for us equals self-love. And self-love will trump and triumph over self-care all the time. Meaning if you love yourself, you will make decisions academically, professionally, that better align with your wellness, as opposed to just doing something because someone told you. And then again, take all the courses you can in human development, like Corey said. It just makes things a little bit less jarring when you're getting some projection or some transference and you're like, that word, I think I heard that word in psychology. Yes, you did. These words are real things, and students learn that psychology is real things that are happening. We just have named it in very odd words, but it's things that are already happening to us. So that's what I would offer. And read, stay reading different books or following different people that allow you to journey in a way that fits for you, for your career. So a mentor.
Thank you for that advice. And before we wrap up there, we just had another question in the chat about this idea of the stigma that's put, of course, on mental illness and mental health. And if anyone would like to maybe speak to that a little more, like how do we remove some of the stereotype from that? I think we touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to get just a little bit more perspective.
Well, I think what you already said, talking about it is key. It makes me think of author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I think she has a TED Talk on the danger of a single story, and she's especially talking about for Black women, when we only have one representation of a certain person's story, we assume that's the same story for everyone. And so I think that's the same with mental wellness. The more people share their personal stories, the more normalized it becomes, the more we see that people with all different backgrounds and all different experiences are going through this. stories are just one of the most effective ways to change people's hearts and minds and change legislation and change policies. So the more that you speak about yourself, the more you encourage others to share their story. And then, of course, modeling what you hope other people will do for you, if giving other people space, like Brandy's just saying, talking about how you're prioritizing self-care for yourself in order to encourage others to do the same, so that people know that it's just like a normal, great thing to do.
One thing I normalize is saying I have a therapist, and I say it as casually as I'm going on vacation, right? My therapist reminded me, or I have a therapist. And I've had students that say, that talk to me privately, and they say, you said you had a therapist. I do, right? And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. I'm like, that's the good part, right? I'd much rather say I have a therapist than to say what I'm struggling with out loud, right? I have a therapist, right? So I can default to that, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? And I normalize it as a therapist, right? Because they ask me, wait a minute, how do you as a therapist? I'm like, I won't even go into that one. But the reality is we know better, right? So I know what I need and I can express it, right? And by me even saying that, I've had students that are more comfortable talking about it because they realize that it's an all thing, right? We all may experience it in different ways, but we all can heal, is my belief. And that's why I'm in this field. And so I really promote the normalization by saying what you feel, right? I feel sad right now. I feel depressed. I don't know what I feel, but it just doesn't feel good, right? Naming it is the first step into healing from it. If we don't name it and normalize naming it, we won't ever heal from it as a culture and for sure as individuals.
I would also chime in with, knowing that it's okay to actually seek help, right? And to ask for help. And I know that that's not something that is normalized either, especially across various cultures. But it goes back to what Brandy was talking about, of that self-love of, I am worthy of not having to feel like this, right? And for whatever reason, I can't do it on my own, and there's no shame in saying that, because most people, right? So Brandy is a therapist, she has a therapist, right? So if a therapist still sees the value of going to a therapist, right? There's no shame in saying I can't do this myself, and that's a big thing for people to be able to admit. But that, and actually seeking assistance, right? It's a very courageous step, difficult step to take sometimes, but knowing that you are worthy of the end outcome of not feeling this, whatever it is, can kind of help with those little baby steps. And it may be as simple as finding somebody that you kind of resonate with, that you connect with, and feeling it out, right? So that's, again, one of the things on our responsibility as healthcare providers is to be able to kind of tease that out of patients without upfront, right off the bat, which a lot of healthcare workers actually do. Are you depressed? Are you safe at home? Right? They're just going through their checklist and not actually really talking to the patient. So, I would advocate for that as well, is to actually reach out and to take that first, what feels like a huge leap of, asking somebody that you feel comfortable with, hey, I think I might need help with this. Do you have anybody? Do you know anybody? Are there any resources? And it could be something as simple as reaching out to any of the four of us saying, are there any resources on campus? Yeah, there are, right? So even something like that can then, again, snowball into a more formal type of help. Right? So, my 2 cents.
Thank you for asking that, Whitney. It's like Corey was saying, I didn't reach out for help until after college, and I felt like I lost years of my life to depression and anxiety. And I think it's wonderful that we're talking about a lot more, especially for college students, and to hopefully get them to get help before too much time passes.
You're welcome. There's just so many stereotypes, like even with me, I'm like to a point where I'm like, okay, I want to get help, because I don't want to be battling this like the same, like next 10 years, still battling the same thing. Because I've learned from like family members where, you see like older family members and you're like, dang, that happened 27 years ago and you haven't let it go, or, and now I'm just like, okay, you know what? I want to be a better me. And I have to put myself out there, because people can't, I always have to remind myself, like, people can't read your mind. So whatever you're struggling with, somebody else is going through it, and just, so.
you so much for that, Whitney. And you can see we're all nodding our heads vigorously because we know exactly what you're talking about. And I think that is, the fact that every professor on this call can and is trying to model what mental wellness looks like, and that it's a struggle, and that sometimes we fall down and we have to pick ourselves up again. But that these were things that, I remember being a student where, professors were pretty robotic, right? They were, and boy, you thought they lived in their classrooms because they couldn't possibly be human beings, right? And because they were just held at such a high level. And I think for a lot of us in the fields now, regardless of whatever field we're in, we try to be so much more human for our students, to model what we would like to see our students be able to feel and to be able to have a full, whole life. And I think, that as we segue to the end of this, I just wanted to acknowledge how much Corey and Lee and Brandy have brought to the college and to the table about helping us get into this new phase of being professors, of being educators, of being learners, and realizing that we are all human and all kind of bring, this whole package that we hope to model for our students. And in whatever form it takes, and to acknowledge that we're human and we also have feelings, and to be able to help our students succeed through their struggles too. So I just wanted to say thank you again to Corey and Lee and Brandy. And this was fantastic, a really wonderful conversation. I'm so glad we were able to have it, and so much you bring to our campus. So from me, thank you so much. And I will turn it over to Diana so that she can give our wrap up.
Okay, well, thank you so much to our fabulous panelists. This was really just such a great way to kick off this event of just sharing your experiences and your perspectives. And I know that those who joined and that those who will be watching later will really benefit from your insights. So thank you guys so much for everything you shared. And I also hope to see you at our future Women's History Month events. The full calendar can be found on the website. And we have lots of great events going on this month. And again, all within our theme of women providing healing, promoting hope. And this was such a great way to kick it off. I really thank you guys for providing us with such a wonderful event. So that's, I think, all I have to say. Anastasia, anything else to add? Okay, well, thank you guys again. And Corey, Brandy, and Lee, we're so appreciative and hope everybody has a wonderful evening. Thanks again.